Hi everyone, so welcome to our thought session on migration. We're covering a number of issues today, and Nikita is going to be leading us, so do you want to crack on?
Okay, so in my ideas for today, I basically focused on how the current UK system is heavily based on income as a condition for migrants from non-EU countries to come into the UK. And though that's not a problem and it is important, I think that when we leave the EU, we need to focus more on skills, because one of the big arguments about Brexit is that it's going to leave a massive skills gap and vacuum in health, in finance, in all these other service industries that we see in the UK. And so my whole piece was about trying to understand how we can create a points-based system in which we match skills of EU migrants coming in to the skills that we need for various industries. And although we have seen this being set up with the UK's points-based system for non-EU migrants, it's quite unclear as to how this works. And actually, when I was researching it, it wasn't really that obvious where this is used and where it isn't. So I think the Brexit is a good opportunity to really hash that out again and try to look at strengthening this on skills and the needs of the UK economy and the UK job market rather than on income. Because effectively, if someone comes to this country from the EU and they don't meet the income criteria at the moment, they would not be able to come to the UK. And what I'm saying, and what I think we should be looking at in a more positive framework, is that we need to understand that they've got skills that we do need. I mean, the UK's got a shortage of engineers. The NHS is suffering massively already because of shortages of applicants. These are things that aren't going to be solved if someone doesn't have enough money, but they will be solved if we look at the skills they can offer instead. And so that's really where my article came from.
So on the back of that, do we see any ways in which a points-based system might not work? So we can start off with the negatives and then move on to the positives of it. So I don't know if it's a thing of where people need to come in for other reasons, apart from economic migration, such as for safety reasons. Does a points-based system work further against those people trying to migrate into a country?
I think Nikita's thought piece said a bit about this, where she said that they should be treated separately. So
Okay.
refugee cases should be treated differently to economic migrants. So whereas you can have a points-based system for people who want to work in the UK, and then say, oh, we have a shortage of, say, nurses, so we'll take more nurses, but we already have enough, say, chefs, so we don't need as many of that. But then refugees should be treated in a completely different boat, because obviously their circumstances are completely different.
So I think that there's a little bit of overlap in this. So there might be people who would be coming into the UK for low-skilled jobs, for example, coming from poorer countries and then coming in for low-skilled jobs, and that kind of blurs a line between people who are seeking asylum and coming here to work. So they might not make it on the points-based system, but in the same way, it might not be enough to seek asylum. And for those people who are sort of in the middle, is Brexit essentially a way to say you're not welcome here for those people in the gap, or is there a way that they can be put into the points-based system as well?
So I think something that I touched on was the Australian model, because though I don't think that the UK should become just a replica of other countries using this system, Australia do try to work on this blurred line between these people that are not really economic migrants, but they're not really refugees or asylum seekers. And the way they do it is also including a yearly cap on the number of skilled workers entering the country, whether that's low scoring on the point system or high scoring. This cap allows them to have an effective overall control of migration, whether or not someone is really skilled or not. And I think that would work, because effectively we are going to have to accept that Brexit is going to lead to a reduction in numbers, and whether or not we think that's positive or negative, one of the big arguments coming out of it is control on migration. And even prior to Brexit, we've had a lot of political rhetoric about controlling net migration. And so I think for the people, without making it seem like, yes, we're going to close the door on them, there really has to be a priority, I think, of where we best see these needs. Because also, when these people are coming to the UK, and I'm wary that I might sound a bit UKIP here, but it's definitely not the case. But no, I'm aware that when people are coming to this country, we have to think about their standard of living as well.
Yeah.
Something I tried to make clear in the article is that people that are coming to this country, yes, it's helping our economy, but we're also trying to help them as well, because effectively they're going to be contributing back to our economy, and we need to make sure that we can secure them a standard of living.
So because there's also a shortage in people who are willing to take on low-skilled jobs, such as in the agricultural sector. Like the amount of young British people who are willing to work on farms is incredibly low, and they rely a lot on EU migrants, and these are people who are going to score very low in the points-based system, and it could effectively rule them out of coming into the country. And so that's a skill shortage that is needed, but is also low, arguably, on a points-based system. So yeah, how does it
Maybe
that?
we could potentially develop more specified categories of a points-based system. So I think in your thought piece you spoke about different services expressing their needs and like how many workers they need. If we could like collect that and have some type of statistics on exactly what industries need workers, and then using the points-based system in that sense, or maybe sort of tailoring the points-based system more to these services as well, to see exactly, like, match people up exactly where they may be needed. So if you get those statistics from those companies that need people, then using that as a way to sort of see where people can fit in, what skills they have that are best suited to those industries. So I don't know what you would call that, but more like category.
So yeah, so like industry specific. Yeah. What do we think of that? Like something more specific?
I mean, I think that we do need something that's going to address the fact that we need unskilled migrants as well. We don't only just need skilled migrants, and if we just say that, then we're missing out on a whole bunch of industries that we do need to provide for. Like you said about agriculture, it's just one example, but then also working in hotels and working in these types of things as well. People do work. People from the UK do work in these industries, but we do still need some more people from the rest of the world to try, to bolster up a little bit more. If we do just primarily focus on who is skilled and, leaving out whoever is unskilled, then, there's a little bit of a grey area, like you were saying before, there is that grey area there, and we do need to address that in some way.
So if there isn't a middle ground, is there some way that we can encourage other British people to take on these kind of jobs, like the incentives that can be made?
I was thinking like maybe introducing more vocational schemes, apprenticeship schemes that are focused on these areas like agriculture, so it's not sort of seen as something that is low skilled. Actually bolstering up the skills required for that job, or like the standards that people working in those jobs, so it's more attractive for people from Britain as well.
To go on that as well, to also like just boost up pay. Just for example, we're talking about Australia. The pay cap in Australia is so much more higher than it is in the UK, and that in itself is enough to try and get people to want to do them types of jobs that otherwise people just don't want to do. And that's part of the reason. That's part of the problem. If there's nothing there to try and attract people into these types of jobs, then we're not going to be able to fill them. There's no way whatsoever. So we do need to have that conversation as well about how we actually attract people that are unskilled as well as being skilled as well.
I also think as well there's like a bit of this idea of perceptions, and how in the UK you're kind of seen as more valuable if you've got academic qualifications behind your name. I think the government have done quite well at addressing this. So they've introduced last year this idea of T levels, which is essentially T is short for technical, and it's essentially like it's an academic qualification. So you get you get a certificate, you do the exams, but it's about you're tested on your skills. So there are T levels. They're planning on T levels for engineering, on things where we have a real shortage of people from the UK and otherwise applying. And I think it's quite a good way to address the fact that not going to uni or not getting a degree, not having A levels to your name is not a way to say that you're not going to be valuable. Like I say, whether or not you're critical of the government's policy on it, that is trying to change the mindset on that. So this idea of T levels would work to what you were saying, in that we need to encourage people to think about these skills in a different way. And I think with those, that would come with businesses as well. If a business sees that you've got 4 T levels in engineering and computer coding or whatever, I don't know, something a lot more practical than it would be from studying a textbook, a business is going to be more likely to hire you, just as if I had 4 A levels on my CV. And I think that's where we need to start having the conversation, like looking at where skills comes into it, rather than those people that only focus on academia and can only go to certain places.
So
I think that's a really good idea, especially because there's so much debate around people having pointless degrees, and a lot of people that do actually graduate and they're not able to get, you know, a skilled job per se, and they end up in, not to look down on it, but jobs like retail where you won't necessarily use your degree. So introducing things like T levels will sort of take off that idea that a degree is everything that you need in academics is
I
fine.
think it's already being launched as well. I think it was last year that the policy was set forward, and it's now rolling out, so I think it is going to be a massive way to
It offers like a more attractive alternative to a degree. So you think, oh, because people say apprenticeship and they automatically view it as less than a degree, but maybe something like T levels will be viewed as somewhat more on a par.
And I think they were looking at it with pay as well, because at the moment the problem with apprenticeships is that yes, it's great you've got an apprenticeship, but they're very low pay.
Yeah, very
and
low
I mean
pay.
the rate for an apprenticeship here, I think it's like £2 an hour because they're getting this training. But the T levels, they're actually looking at trying to boost that pay to reflect the fact that okay, I've got a degree, so I would be entitled to this as a graduate. If you've got a T level, it'd be the same thing. Your qualifications means that you're not going to be on £2 an hour, which how can anyone
It's
afford
an incentive
to live
as well
there?
for people
And,
to do that if you pay
exactly.
them. Yeah.
And it's changing the way people think about like skills in academia.
So like, let's say that system was signed into law and implemented today. There's still going to be a lag because we're waiting for people to get those qualifications. We're waiting for businesses to come round to it and to actually accept it, because it's going to take a little bit of time for mindsets to change completely. And in that interim, there is going to be a skill shortage because we're thinking post-Brexit. So if there is going to be a definitive stop, then there's going to be a period where, you know, that, as we're speaking about this transition period where there's going to be a skill shortage. So could it be a thing of where it gets phased in slowly, where EU migration is phased down slowly, where the points-based system is brought in gradually, or
Again, I think it could also link to like having the points-based system for different categories of services, because the UK could sort of offer these T levels, for example, to countries outside of the UK as a way for them to come in and become skilled workers. So that could be an incentive for coming in, and it will also sort of give them the skills required to actually work here and be self-sufficient.
I agree with what you just said. There will be a lag, of course there will be a lag. And you know, you do have to keep that into account. So if you were to try and implement something like this, like you say, it does have to be done gradually. It can't be done right away, you know, we're about to leave, so then this is the rule, blah, blah, blah. We can't do it like that. It's just silly. You have to do it, you know, to phase it in slowly, you have to phase out the other things slowly as well. But then how you actually do that in means of, like, you know, politics and so on and so forth is a totally different thing. And, you know, this is going to be something that will happen in the next, like, 5-6 years, because obviously you have to wait for people to be trained up, you know, to be able to actually gain the skills and then to go into these types of industries. And if you don't allow that, then we're going to be totally lost as a country anyway.
But I also think that the agreement that they've made so far in terms of citizens' rights will kind of work to reduce that lag, because you've got people that are now going to be guaranteed citizenship for 20 years, which are already people that are working here, have the skills, are already in industries. So we have got that 20-year period between when we're here now and then when we leave. There's going to be that time where, yes, okay, people aren't going to be able to come in, but we're already going to have all these people here. And then they're going to have the issue 20 years down the line where these people are going to have to make a decision. So I think that kind of like sets that back a bit. There is still going to be a lag, of course. There's still going to be a gap, and already you're seeing the NHS, like these headline figures, 96% drop in applications. But I think maybe that could help it.
And I suppose as well, a 20-year period almost gives us an extended transition period where, you know, we can phase these things in and people with new qualifications can come in. And to touch on what you said as well, I think that's a good standard would be to say that internationally it's available. So the same way that we have the international baccalaureate, where it's an internationally recognised qualification that anybody can have and you can use it to get into university, so the T levels rolling it out internationally could work as well.
Same with GCSEs, like GCSEs work the same way. So in Africa, most students do either an IB or an A level. So to introduce that sort of around the world, like in the Commonwealth, would be pretty easy, just because of the relationship we have there. I think it's like a fantastic idea to ensure that it's not just sort of reliant on young people in the UK being interested in these sort of paths. to work that everyone else is as well. And so when migrants come in, you know that they've got this technical qualification already that is recognised by the UK.
And do we know of any negatives that it's had on Australia's system? So it's often seen that they're quite restrictive in their immigration, and the perception of a country's immigration system does affect the type of people who are willing to go there. So does it mean that moving to a points-based system could affect us in a less tangible way, Britain?
I don't know, I don't necessarily think I'd agree. I think that yes, you can see Australia's immigration system in a restrictive way, but they are also, as I wrote in the article, they're seen as one of the best countries at managing their immigration. And when you watch the TV programmes as well, you do kind of think, God, they're always telling people off, and they're always telling them what they can't bring in. I love nothing to declare. But no, like, I think that yes, a certain type of person goes there, but they're also very attractive for a lot of British people to go there. You see a lot of people emigrating, and they do still manage to, I think, have quite a good control on it. And I would attribute a lot of it to this cap. They're not saying that we don't want anyone at all. They're quite, I would say, fairly generous in the amount of people they let in. I don't know the exact number, but yeah, I think that it's about control, and also their geography and their like space in the world means that they are also restricted in terms of who's going to be able to make that 24-hour journey to even get there. You know, so I guess that helps. But I don't know, maybe question this idea of them being perceived as restricted and then people not wanting to go there, because I think especially in the UK we have a lot of people that end up going there.
Yeah, but I think the difference might be that sort of when someone from the UK sort of emigrates to Australia, it's maybe like a post-work decision, and they've gone to like live out their days in the outback, and then like compared to like migration from maybe sort of thinking about who's near them, like the Pacific, from Asia, from even, I know a lot of East Africans try to emigrate to Australia, and then that's where I think that this perception of restrictive immigration system has come into play, because it's a certain type of person that seems to be as though, and I'm no expert on the Australian immigration system, so I don't know that that's necessarily the case, but that's certainly the perception.
But do you not think that's about like the opportunities that lie in Australia, rather than the fact that they don't seem to be welcoming people? Do you think that? Like,
I do.
Because I don't think people don't go to Australia because they think, oh, they don't want us there. Whereas I think that, for example, I wouldn't really potentially want to go to Russia, maybe, because I might think, oh, they don't want me there. Or something, you know, somewhere like that. Some people might say, I don't want to go to this country because they don't want me. I don't know if that's necessarily the case.
So it's like a
maybe it's it's kind of this idea that what is there for me there. Whereas with the UK, with Europe as well, and I think the big thing about us with Brexit is going to be that we are the door to all of the, like, as an island, we are the door to other places in terms of access. So I think maybe that's the difference, is that Australia's kind of isolated, so people don't necessarily see as much of a benefit as wanting to emigrate there full time or for forever, compared to here or Europe.
I think that's the key as well, because Australia, as you touched on the geography, Australia is very, very isolated, whereas you look at somebody who wants to maybe do interrailing, and Britain could be like an easy stop point to fly over to one of the other European countries, and if and again it's all this idea about access, and if we do go to this points-based system, we are cutting off a lot. Like, Australia doesn't have the history of being in the EU. The UK is going from being part of an integrated system to being a points-based system, and it sounds good, but I still think that the intangibles of that change are going to be maybe underestimated, you know. But
because the UK has a high demand for immigrants, and Australia does, purely because of its geographical location.
Exactly, the proximity to other major markets as well.
So that's going to pose a massive problem in terms of the fact that we'll get a larger volume of immigrants, meaning we have to turn down more people. Also, bad press from doing that.
Like, intangibles again. And I honestly think that the points-based system is a good compromise to have in terms of bringing in the kind of people that will benefit the British economy. But I think because of the history that we have, the positive history in terms of being part of the EU and having a relatively flexible immigration system, I think going from that to something that's more similar to Australia might.
And the Commonwealth as well.
Yeah,
History of
yeah.
Commonwealth immigration.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the history is different. So if Australia turns people away,
It's like.
that's all right.
Yeah.
You don't have a history of coming into my country,
Yeah.
wrecking it,
Mhm.
and then not
Yeah.
expecting me
Yeah.
That's it,
to
yeah.
come
Right.
and live
Wanna come back,
freely
yeah.
in a functioning
Yeah.
democracy because you ruined mine.
Mhm.
Whereas, like, in as least controversial way as possible.
Yeah.
Like, that is something that Australia doesn't have to deal with, and maybe that's why they. Because if you sort of think about Trump near the beginning, I think it was the end of his campaign and the beginning of his presidency, referenced Australia as perhaps a system of immigration that the US could adopt,
Yeah.
and everyone was up in arms because I think in that case the person and the country for which he stands saying this is problematic in a way that it isn't for Australians to be like, no, this
Yeah.
works for us.
Yeah.
We tend not to have many problems with it. We are, apparently one of the most effective countries at controlling our immigration because we don't have a history of being problematic in other people's countries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they were a former colony, weren't
Exactly.
they? So they can do that.
But also on the whole Commonwealth stuff, Commonwealth nations do have a privileged relationship with us in terms of immigration as well. And while I am also very critical of Britain and their relationship in history, they have tried to reflect and understand their complex relationship with the Commonwealth in terms of immigration. So that's why you do see a lot of people from India, from Australia, from New Zealand, all these different places, maybe not New Zealand, all these different places in the UK and others because of this. There is privileges there in terms of the Commonwealth relationship and our ties with them. And I'd also maybe say that, to be more cynical, yes, we are going to end up closing our doors to people that should be here and are from the EU, and we don't want to end up looking restrictive. But at the same time, we have to remember that leaving the EU is going to mean we're not getting as much funding to actually have the infrastructure, the communities, the transport to facilitate that many people. And I mean, I look at London itself, the EU structural funds and all of this kind of stuff, they were giving loads of money, well, are still now, giving loads of money to UK regions and towns and cities to boost them up, to allow them to flourish and be able to manage this. But that is going to go, and we are going to have to realise that something's got to give in terms of how we manage it. And I think that our priority has to be filling this place where we need them, doctors, nurses, where we actually genuinely need these people. And then after, we look at how we can incorporate others. But I think there has to be some sort of give and take here, and that we can't necessarily accept. I don't think Britain should have to feel obliged to accept people that are going to potentially
Not be as beneficial.
and also like they're not going to have a necessarily good standard of living compared to others. And I just think that it sounds, I don't want to end up sounding like I'm for closing the doors on people, because it's not that at all. But like in a realistic, rational sense, we have to think about the fact that they could end up living on the streets, and that wouldn't be good for anyone, because then we would have this image problem as well. The UK highest numbers of homelessness people here, which we already have an issue now, and we haven't even left the EU yet. So I don't know, I think there's got to be kind of a realistic approach to this.
I feel like it's also a really good opportunity for Britain to actually start focusing on nurturing its own talents and the people that are here already, and sort of getting them, into them really high skilled jobs, like being doctors, etc., etc. So we don't have to depend on people as much.
Do you not think that with all this it's going to just extend the rhetoric of nationalism, and that in itself is going to be a problem? I mean, that's just a question in general for people. Like,
I feel like Brexit is just
Yeah,
nationalism
it is.
anyway.
Yes.
And there's
Writ
sort
large.
of no way of escaping that, because one of the main reasons why Britain actually left the EU is because of the immigration problem. I would say that was what a lot of the discourses were before the referendum. So migration is going to be something that we can't escape from. Like, in terms of nationalism, we're going to be seen as a nationalist.
And I think, to be honest, I don't necessarily agree with this position, but like we tended to, before Brexit, sort of just like brush anyone who has a problem with the immigration system under the rug as like a racist or a xenophobe or, you know, a problematic individual. And now, because the majority of the population has voted to leave, partly on the basis of this, we have to take it seriously and recognise that it is an economic issue beyond it being a political issue, like a position held by a minority of people who like we should just sort of sweep aside because they might sort of have divisive opinions. So I definitely think this is an opportunity to have a discussion about the fact that it is like being like at its core an issue of economics, and like there are people, and we need, at the same time we need to recognize that these are people and not statistics, but
we need to deal
there's
with
only so much.
And also I'd say that leaving the EU isn't going to stop the immigration question. I mean, I remember a really funny interview with someone after they voted to leave the EU and being asked, why did you vote? Oh, well, I voted to stop the immigrants from Africa. And someone said, but you've just voted to leave the European Union. And he said, yeah, that's why I've done it. So, you know, this is clearly, it's going to be an issue because we're still going to have net migration, and some of our highest immigration figures are not from the EU. And so we're always going to have this idea of immigration as an issue from this specific part of the population, I think. So, yeah.
So we don't need to please everybody.
Well, they're getting what they want essentially anyway. I mean, you know, this without you know beating around the bush. You know, you've got to. I think a lot of people realise that this decision wasn't such a rosy idea, when they look at all the other things that are gonna make and like, gonna have an effect. So it's got to be about compromise. And I think that's what a lot of people in government that are more level-headed about Brexit. You know, not the ones that are saying have a second referendum, let's do this. The ones that are actually taking it in a more pragmatic, rational sense are trying to say that we have to think about a way that's going to also recognise that 48% of people voted to stay in the EU. It wasn't 90% leave and 10% go. So we've got to reflect it, and migration is going to be the key issue, I think. Because with the points-based system, for example, we've got loads of people in the UK that come out with a degree that would be able to qualify for a job in the banking industry, let's say. But if a bank is coming to you and saying, actually, I've got a shortage, because the whole thing, I think, is centred around businesses really being involved and saying, what we need is this. So if a bank comes and says to you, I need coding, I need people that can code, but we don't have, you know, anyone that has got that in our meritocracy bubble, then you are going to have to think, okay, well, here are all these great people, but here are coders that are coming from elsewhere. So I think maybe there'd be a bit of conflict there.
You've got to put one as a priority, then one as the secondary. But it's just a question of which.
But I feel like it could also just be something that the services industry can focus on, as opposed to the government. So when they are rolling out applications, maybe they themselves having like an immigration officer that sort of looks at where the skill shortages are and the type of applicants that are coming in. So it's not just the government, you know, imposing this point-based system or whatever, but the businesses are getting really involved in exactly who they let in, etc. And maybe there could be like some type of regulation that governs whatever they do, and that sort of helps them, gives them a guideline to who they accept on.
It's almost like what Switzerland has, where or it could turn into that, where they give priority to Swiss nationals when they're hiring for jobs. So it could become a thing of where we have this need, let's look for British people first to fit that need, and if we don't find them, then we can find the best people from wherever. So so it's almost like Britain first. Like, British people get the first priority for jobs, and if we don't have that, if we can't find them here, then you go elsewhere.
I guess
Yes.
I feel like if there was a workplace where it was all British people, I think one of the reasons why the UK, like one of the reasons why our industries thrive is because it's not like that, and we have a real benefit of sharing cultures, sharing ideas, sharing I don't know, I find it quite problematic to think of it in that way.
I think, I think even a quota would be better than that. Like, I'm not a fan of quotas, but that would be better than prioritising sort of for 100% of the positions, British people, and then like maybe the last 3% you're like, well, the rest of the British people aren't sufficiently qualified, so now we'll pick like...
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think like if we do have this system, that's where it will go to.
To be fair though, you could say we already have some elements of that system already. When you apply for a job, they ask you, do you have the right to work in this country?
Yes,
Are you
yeah.
an
That
EU
filters
or
you
EA
out first.
national? That is essentially a filter for.
Yeah.
If you say no, if you say I don't have the right to work in the UK, your application is put somewhere else. And I mean, I have a lot of friends that were on those work visas and either had to face the issue of finding a job or being deported. And that's when you realise that we actually do have that system, but not to that extent like the Swiss.
There are elements of it. Yeah.
Very clear
Yeah.
in the job market. And
Yeah.
because effectively, companies don't want to have to hire someone where they're going to have to pay £20,000 for you to stay in this country. That's the fact.
Yeah.
As a business, why would you want to if I can hire John from England instead of, you know?
Yeah.
So, do you see what I mean there? To make it really reductive, it
Yeah.
makes sense from a business point of view.
Yeah.
So maybe we do have that already in some ways.